Hello and welcome to Mirror Mirror, the podcast where astrology meets the silver screen. I'm your host, Alex Trenoweth, astrologer, author, and lifelong film enthusiast. This show is inspired by my book Mirror Mirror, The Astrology of Famous People and the Actors Who Portrayed Them. Each week, we'll explore the fascinating interplay between two charts, the real-life figure whose story captured the world's imagination, and the actor who stepped into their shoes on screen. We'll also look at the transits of the film's release to figure out what was going on in the person's life astrologically. Sometimes the stars align in perfect harmony, sometimes they clash, sparking the kind of creative tension that makes a performance unforgettable. Along the way, we'll uncover what these cosmic connections can teach us about fate, timing, and the magic of storytelling. So grab your popcorn and your ephemeris. It's time to look at the stars in every sense of the word. Okay, so thank you very much for joining Mirror Mirror, the podcast, and I'm very, very honored to have Margaret Gray with me. And Margaret has asked to talk about the new movie, Maria, about the life of Maria Callas, the opera singer, starring Angelina Jolie. So we have watched this in various parts. I had a lot of strong opinions about Angelina Jolie playing Maria Callas. I wasn't sure about it at all. But Margaret, what were your first impressions when you heard this movie was coming out?
I was really impressed with Angelina Jolie being chosen to act the role of Maria Callas. And the more I kind of really read up on it and thought about it and looked at their charts, the more it made sense to me. I think they're both two very powerful women. And I think Angelina Jolie to me is perfect for this role.
And you bring something up that's extremely important. I think that, one of the reasons why I think Mirror Mirror brings a lot to the astrology table is that we are asking people to look at the astrology. Because, when I said, I was uneasy about Angelina, that was before I saw the astrology of the two women and the transits of when the movie was actually released. It was released in Venice, Italy. So we're going to start off with looking at the woman herself, Maria Callas. And I know that you've done a lot of research on this, Margaret, but I just want to start out with just point out a few things. She is kind of the ultimate diva. You watch her actual footage, and she has a way of carrying herself that you just think, wow, here is royalty. It's entering the building. And she has Jupiter rising, and she's tall. And at one point in her life, she carried weight, not a lot of weight, but enough that it affected her voice, and she lost that weight. The next planet along the horizon, it would be the sun in Sagittarius. She traveled a lot. She was interested in men who were from a different country than she was, maybe the similar culture, but a different country. And then her Mercury comes in, her voice. Now, in opera, she used a technique called the bel cantor technique. And I know a little bit about this because I took opera lessons a very long time ago. But the bel cantor technique is all about the way you hold your mouth. And it's kind of like, I'm not insulting either woman. I'm just saying that it's kind of like making your mouth into like an echo chamber. And it's the way that you hold your mouth, the way you pronounce your vowels that makes the sound as it is. And Maria definitely had that quality. Like when, in the film, I saw the film on my home computer. I didn't see it in the cinema, so I feel like I really need to actually experience the sound in a proper cinema, so I can get the sound of Maria singing. Because she was famous before. I really took an interest in classical music. But what a chart for a diva.
It really is. It's like the Scorpio rising ruled by, Pluto in the eighth house. There's the passion. Because when I first looked at the chart, I was kind of surprised to see that there wasn't more water in the chart. I expected to see maybe a moon in Scorpio or, a lot more Cancer, a lot more Pisces, and there wasn't. But it kind of, when you look at that Scorpio rising, that Pluto, there's the passion. Also, something that I found quite interesting when I was reading about her is that she was one of the first opera singers to really do a lot of acting as part of the role, but the acting part for her came from the singing rather than vice versa, which I thought was really, really interesting. So that ability to really move from that place of her voice into the movements. And apparently, they said she did maybe sometimes only 10 movements on the stage, but they were all a reflection of the music, which is absolutely extraordinary, really. So she was way ahead of her time and really one of these very powerful women. And you know what's interesting? There was a very interesting article in The Guardian about her about a year ago that said so often she's portrayed as this, you know, this betrayed woman, that's the important thing to remember about her, rather than she is this megastar, this very powerful woman. And that the thing between her and Angelina that struck me they have in common so powerfully is that they're both very resilient and strong women, and they both have so much fire in in their chart. And I think that Sagittarius is really very much about a sense of hope, about picking herself up when things go wrong, when things don't work out, and just keep going and really keep finding a sense of meaning through her art, her creativity, and her passion. Passion is also another thing that is so powerful for her and for Angelina.
And you mentioned something about it made me realize that she also has the fixed star Algol on her descendant. And you talked about, there were so many times when, she's this powerful woman in and of herself, but, actually she suffered an awful lot in her lifetime through the relationships that she had. So I think that, something that you said just triggered off me looking at where Algol was in her chart. It's angular. She grew up poor. And but when you watch her in live footage, she just has this way of, you would never guess that she was once went hungry. And she grew up in wartime, and she really had quite a difficult childhood. According to the film, her mother made her sing for to earn money, and that might have done some early damage to her vocal cords. But with the bel cantor technique, you don't really have to worry too much about the vocal cords because it's all to do with your mouth. It's almost like an illusion, really. Like you sound big, but it's really all to do with how you hold your mouth, and of course breath control. um, Angelina, one of the things I heard about this was that Angelina was going to sing. And now I had never heard of Angelina singing at any point in her career. She might sing like an angel at home, I just never heard of it. So when I heard that she was going to take on the role of Maria Callas, I kind of felt this dread. And so I was expecting to hear really bad opera, really poor imitation of Maria. But what actually happened is we get the beautiful recordings of Maria. And at the end, and I'm not having a go at Angelina because it's no small feat to learn the bel cantor technique at the age of when you're over 50, you've never sung professionally before, and you're going to sing Maria Callas. So she sang Maria Callas towards the end of her life. So you do hear, and you can hear Angelina's voice, but it's supported by Maria's. And it is an absolutely, I got shivers listening to this. I'm so full of respect for actors who learn a new skill and they bring it to the film. Especially, I think about Margot Robbie learning how to ice skate in I, Tonya, or Val Kilmer learning how to sing like Jim Morrison, Taron Egerton doing Elton John. I think of all these actors that took on that really difficult skill and pulled it off. Okay, so there's a lot more we could say about Maria. What a chart, but you can see her.
Let me just jump in
Oh, sure.
very quickly. I want to say something about, you mentioned about her mum. It was mostly her mother who drove her to sing at a very early age, apparently to get money in and for fame and so on. Of course, her parents didn't get on very well. And, I think it's important to notice that Moon square Pluto aspect. And she never got on with her mother. And at one point, I think it was in 1950 or something, she actually wrote that she stopped speaking to her mother. She tried to connect with her mother as an adult, but was never able to. So there is that powerful moon Pluto, when you think of attachment, and of course you work as a teacher as well. So this is something you work with every day with the young children, and that's such an important aspect there.
And I often say too, when we're children, we turn our moon face towards our mothers. We are our moon in front of our mothers. And when she turned that moon face to Pluto, what does she see? The square aspect means to see, and we can see, we can see the planets clearly when they're in a square aspect. So what does she see when she turns towards that mother? She sees maybe destruction, or maybe, the absolute bottomlessness of life, because, it wasn't an easy upbringing.
And I also wonder if there was a little bit of envy by her mother towards her. And of course, there often is with mothers. They kind of, mothers tend to reach midlife as daughters are blossoming and blooming. But if there's a consciousness about it, then it doesn't come out in a destructive way. But look at that moon square Venus aspect as well. And I've seen that a lot in charts when children grow up with some of that envy from mother that is unconscious and not worked through and can really leave an imprint on them.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. Yeah, I mean, I think early childhood. No, we will talk about relationships in astrology and the course that you put together. But I would like to insert before I forget that I'm doing something on adolescence, for the course, and I'll be talking a lot about, early childhood experiences, particularly adolescence, and how it affects us later in life. So she has, the Jupiter very close to her sun, so with every important Jupiter aspect, it would pick up solar energy, from, so it almost magnifies that Sagittarius need for freedom, and the need to be without rules, and to be maybe a little bit reckless and to take risks. And also she has the Saturn conjunct Mars, which can be very restricting and very frustrating. I heard the metaphor, like driving with the brakes on, uh, that feeling like, the more you push, the more resistance you get with her. And she would feel that at every important Saturn transit as she was growing up. And she would have to learn how to manage those. And as she got older, she would actually learn how to deal with those, obstacles a lot better than, she did as a child. So the mother's role very early on in her childhood, as the movie depicts, would have been extremely challenging for her.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go on to Angelina, and Angelina first came to our attention with Girl Interrupted a good 30 years ago, and she was a force of nature, in that film. She played, they were girls, young women in an institution. It's with Winona Ryder, and Angelina played a girl who had a lot, let's just park it as a lot of difficulties, social difficulties, and she was quite a very strong character. But, she was quite young when she did this role. And looking at her chart, I really could see the Jupiter, Moon, and Mars coming out, that forceful, impulsive energy that really shone through. And then as an actress, because I kind of feel like I grew up with Angelina, because she's a bit younger than me, but I got to watch her progress into the superstar that she is, going from role to role to role, and from man to man to man as well. But she's moved on in her life, and I feel like I got to see her emerge into this powerhouse that she is today.
Really a very, very powerful woman. And what I'm kind of so impressed with, not just her acting, but really the fact that she used her power in the world and her looks and so on to advocate for the most vulnerable. Really, that her work across the globe to bring attention to war zones, to the welfare, well-being of young people, of children, of refugees, that really she could have just sat at home in her beautiful house with a pool and just enjoyed her money, and she didn't. That she really, and also the courage to create her own family, that she always wanted to do that. She always wanted a family. And I think that's one of the things with Maria Callas, that Maria Callas also wanted a family, but because of circumstances, that never really was able to happen for her. Whereas Angelina really decided to kind of stop all of the kind of, the self-destructive behavior in order to adopt her first son. And that she wrote very clearly, she said, once I adopted him, I knew that was the end of my self-destructiveness, that I really needed to take care of him. So it's really quite an impressive turnaround, which of course fire signs can do, and they're both fire signs. So there's this courage, this resilience, this kind of breaking the mold of going ahead and doing things. Now, Angelina has no earth in her chart, so the manifestation of it all would take quite a bit of effort. That's part TV saying to people, please give money. She's gone to the countries and said, I'm standing here. This is what's happening. Help is needed now. So immensely courageous, really.
Oh, and she's got, just talk about family. She's Cancer rising with Venus right there. Very, very, um, I'm not going to say gentle because I don't think Cancerians are necessarily gentle, but they understand the needs of other people. They're very sensitive to what other people need. And in fact, they can overdo it sometimes. And so there's that that need to protect, that protectiveness, I think is the word I'm searching for. And the tenacity is certainly there, that I'm not going to give up. No matter, I think, no matter how many trials and tribulations she's faced in her life, she's always come through it with almost like that Maria Callas sort of strength. So they're very similar, I think.
Yes, and the creativity of Cancer, that Cancer ascendant, that she used it to be creative as well, and that she maintained her own identity. And again, that the tabloid press have tried to really just talk about Maria Callas and Angelina in terms of their relationships rather than as women in their own rights with their own identity. And both of them fought very hard to say, this is my identity. My identity is my art. My identity is who I am in the world. My identity is what I do, what I produce, what I create. For Angelina, that's also her family, her children, and what she's done and how she's raised them and how she's role modeled raising them. For Maria Callas, it was really her singing, but both of them really fought back against being labeled in terms of the men they were with. Why would they be labeled in terms of the men they were with or not with, or what those men did or didn't do, rather than being their own person?
Yeah, and they do come across as their own person. They never you never lose Angelina in her relationship. And I think the same thing with Maria, although Maria is a little bit older than us, and maybe we missed, seeing her grow up in front of our eyes. But I never got the impression that anyone got one over on Maria. And Angelina has also played another role, which she plays a mother. That's been a couple, but The Changeling, about a missing child that she played, which was, I think she won, is nominated for an Oscar for that one. But it's another biopic where she stepped into the role very, very well of a real life person. Okay, so here we have the charts. Now, usually when I look at charts, I'm going to have the real life person in the middle and the person who's playing the real life person on the outside. But we're a little bit uncertain of Maria Callas's time of birth. So I've done it the other way around. So I have Angelina Jolie in the middle and Maria on the outside. And I was saying to Margaret before we started that Maria Callas died the very year that Chiron was discovered. In fact, Maria died just a couple weeks before Chiron was discovered. And you were saying something really important about Chiron
Yeah,
for
I
Angelina.
sorry, Alex, I keep butting in. My
It's
Aries
okay.
so enthusiastic, but I think it's just so interesting the powerful role that Chiron plays with these two women. And first of all, they have Chiron in the same sign of Aries, which Chiron in Aries is that wounding to a sense of potency. So it's like there's a drive to really connect with one's own potency, to heal that wound, and to also empower other people, which I think they both did as role models for women, for young people in the world to follow their dream, follow their heart, follow their passion. And here is Angelina's Jupiter on top of Maria's Chiron. So there's kind of an almost expansion of it, an understanding of it. And also, Jupiter can give meaning to planets it lands on by synastry. So in the movie, I think she really gave meaning to Maria's Chiron. Maria wasn't a victim of that Chiron. She was somebody who was really did her thing and was so creative in spite of the Chiron. And that's really what we aim to do. So that's the first thing with Chiron. And Also, what I wanted to say that's so important is, of course, they have the suns in opposition to each other. So there is a connection where Angelina's sun in Gemini is opposite Maria's sun in Sagittarius. And opposite signs, it's about finding a place in the middle, but there's an attraction to it. And fire and air get on very well together. So I imagine for Angelina, because she's so very good, as you said about her movies, slipping into those roles, she kind of could get it, could really slip into it.
And we were talking about Maria's Pluto square her moon, but here in the synastry, we have a moon. We're a little bit uncertain of Maria's time of birth, but I got 6 a.m. from a couple different sources, just not the exact hour, exact minute, but it would be conjunct Angelina's Pluto. So we have this really strong connection. So when Angelina steps in, maybe she understands that connection that Maria would have had with her mother, or maybe Angelina, because she had a difficult relationship with her mother, maybe she understands and she used that experience, those experiences, to help her step into the role of Maria. And then we have the Maria's Jupiter on Angelina's North Node. And I found through my research, I've watched about 200 biopics, films about real life people, and I found that Chiron is often implicated in the connections between the two, but also the nodes, either the south or the north node, are usually implicated, meaning that it's almost a sense of destiny. We hear about people playing a role they were destined to play. And I think this is true with Angelina Jolie. So before I knew their charts and I was feeling uneasy, I had no reason to feel uneasy because actually Angelina, whether she understands the astrology or not, she gets Maria. And she's a good choice. I'd love to. It'll never happen, I don't think, that we'll hear about casting directors using astrology. If they do use astrology, they'll keep it a secret. But it'd be wonderful if someone came out and said, "Oh yeah, I knew this all along, and I knew that Angelina would be a good Maria." But I think we're a long way from getting there in astrology.
To come to you, Alex, for that. And also another thing there, look at Maria's sun on Angelina's Neptune. Angelina has Neptune in the fifth house of creativity. And there is the sun illuminating that. So from beyond the grave, the power of people's charts from beyond the grave, that we have a connection. And I don't know about you, but I often say to students when they're studying synastry or composite chart in relationships and astrology to really look at charts of the people they enjoy, the writers, the movie directors, the movie stars, all of that, and notice why are they connected with them, the poets, what is their chart, what is the synastry between their charts, because there's always a connection.
Oh, and that kind of leads me to my next question for you, Margaret. Without showing your chart and giving your details away, I mean, I say the same thing in Mirror Mirror about taking it to that next step. If you like somebody, what are your connections to the person? I'll say that, for me with Angelina, a lot of my planets in Cancer square her planets in Aries. And I managed to manifest a daughter who has a lot of planets in Aries square my planets in Cancer. So there's that sort of almost, if I say it kind of adds the grit to the relationship, I think is how a lot of people might describe a square. It makes me want to do something with that relationship to to maybe be productive with that, to work with that. And Angelina is actually one of the charts that I work with, have worked with quite a bit, with my own students.
Me too. I have worked a lot with her chart, and in fact, with her and Brad Pitt's chart, in part because we have times of birth and it's so interesting, but also I've always had this draw towards Angelina. Even before I did astrology, I just thought there was something about her that just intrigued me. So, yes, my sun is pretty close, my sun in Aries to her Chiron. So, there is that connection. It's really between her MC and Chiron. And also, my Venus is pretty close to an opposition to her Pluto. So we kind of lock in that way. And I think that's where, when planets lock in, we kind of have that pull because we learn so much about ourselves as well. There's something that literally mirrors back to us something about ourselves.
And I think, because, part of being human is we look for similarities in ourselves. And I'm sure that, in your relationships course, this will be something that you're going to talk an awful lot about how people search um, subconsciously for the missing parts, or for the part of themselves maybe that they don't like to work with, and they want to practice on somebody, for lack of a better word, to work out, what is it about me that I don't like, that that person can help me to understand. Human relationships are extremely complex, and astrology really helps us to work out what it is we need from other people.
Absolutely, Alex. I think, I always say that the reason I teach relationships and astrology is because it's through relationships that the mirror of relationships we learn about ourselves. If we lived on a desert island, we wouldn't have that mirroring back. And I get a little bit concerned. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but with AI and apps on phones where people create their perfect partner on an app rather than a human being that reflects back to them their shadow and also the good things so that we see reflected in that person. And I think the starting point and the end point with relationships is always ourselves. It's all about learning about ourselves. We think it's about others, but actually it's all that journey about ourselves. That's why I call the current program Astrology of the Heart, because it's how do we come back to our own heart, and how do we start with the healing for ourselves? How do we go through that process through life? And of course, you're doing the talk on adolescence, the developmental stages, and that's a new part of the course because it's such an important part, because those early phases, and people think it's just attachment in early years. It's not. Adolescence, of course, has that huge impact on midlife transits as well, and the decisions we make and how we relate with other people. So as you say, it's very complex and so fascinating and so interesting.
And the more we understand relationships and how they work, the better we understand ourselves, and the stronger we make our relationships. And coming back to what you said about the AI robots or AI boyfriends and girlfriends, I mean, how annoying would it be to have somebody who agrees with you over everything, you know? Um, or, who does everything that you want them to do. I mean, what are you going to learn from that?
Yeah.
So, more reasons to be, I mean, I guess the AI can help us find information that we need to find quickly, can give us some sort of company when we need it. But, really, what does it teach us as people? I think is the question I have. But it's all things to do, as Pluto moves through Aquarius, all things that are going to be coming out to be dealt with. We were talking also before we started about copyright, how cautious we are nowadays, because we see AI taking our ideas, something we put on the internet 20 years ago suddenly comes out on AI. We thought we were being an original. Maybe we were, but AI is picking up on our ideas. It's strange new territory.
Yes, it is. And I hope there won't be a whole generation of very narcissistic people, who are, you're wonderful all the time. So it's going to be interesting. That's really,
Mm.
we need another podcast for that topic, because I think it's such an interesting one.
Yeah, well, there have been quite a few movies that have I'm thinking about there is a film called AI, where they were talking about that very thing about having a relationship with robots. And then there's Ted, who's an animated character. And there's a few others. The Mask, those were cartoon characters. So those just off the top of my head of characters that aren't real but are interacting with humans.
The great thing about movies is they're always a step ahead. They're very Uranian, aren't they? They're kind of almost a few years ahead. We see the movie and then we look back and think, gosh, that's actually happening now. So I think, you know, so it's interesting for people to see what's coming out now, because it is probably what's going to happen in the collective in a few years. It's like the directors, the writers, I think they tune into that zeitgeist of the collective and really are able to almost see that Uranian picture.
Yeah, it must be true because Homer Simpson said so. Okay, so now I put Maria back in the middle with Angelina on the middle outside, and then the transits of when the film was released on the very outside. And so what I think happens with the transits is that they trigger off certain events that happen in a person's life. So for Angelina, the release of the film would coincide, I love that word, with the kind of accolades that she would have received with the film. And for Maria, this kind of is like almost evidence of the eternal horoscope, that just because you're no longer here doesn't mean you're no longer here. The transits continue to function within your life. And so there's a lot of things that I've noticed. So we still don't, even though I put the wrong slide up, I had to edit it, but I did remember that there was a nodal thing going on. So what we have here, we talked about Moon and Pluto square in Maria's chart. We talked about the synastry with the Moon Pluto being conjunct in Maria and Angelina's chart, but the transits showed the South Node was on that Moon Pluto conjunction. So bringing that sense of destiny, what are we seeing? We are seeing Maria Callas in the final week of her life. And we're seeing Angelina step into unknown territory. Angelina, I have no doubt, had to dig deep into her own sort of self to pull out those notes. I mean, most people are very uncomfortable after childhood to sing in front of others if they haven't been trained. Some people will burst out in the song at any moment if they grew up, kind of grew up with being comfortable with singing. But most adults, don't like it. They won't do it. But Angelina, did it. So that's pretty amazing, I think.
It's incredible. And you know what struck me when I first looked at this is that Angelina was in her Chiron return when the film was released. But what's even more interesting is that I looked at when they started the film, which was actually in yeah, I haven't got the date in front of me, but I do know that Chiron, if you look back at when the film was started, I think it was in 23. In fact, I think it was October 23. Chiron was right on Maria Callas's Chiron. So it's like they both had their Chiron returns at the start of the movie, even though, of course, Maria had passed on, and then at the end of the movie. So again, back to this Chironian theme. And what struck me was that Angelina said that this was one of the most healing experiences for her ever. Very challenging, but very healing. And the reason was that to sing, to learn to train to sing over all those months, she had to connect with her body and her emotions. And of course, Gemini as a sign is not a sign that naturally veers towards wanting to kind of connect to those emotions, but she really had to. She had to dig incredibly deep to do that. And she's got Moon in Aries. Moon in Aries doesn't want to do that either. So there is the Chironian experience. How amazing. And these two women create, both of them with this Chironian experience at the time of the release, the creation, the release of the movie, are offering something that is healing to other people. So that's why I think this movie is particularly powerful, because it's not just about entertainment. Not that many movies are just about entertainment, but I think there's something profound in this. And the music alone is profoundly healing. I mean, to sit there and just listen to those 2 hours or whatever of music is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, even though my sound system on my personal computer isn't great, um, you know, it did have that quality of bringing like a balm, you know, and Maria has that quality too. People say this about her, her voice. The most important singer of the 20th century, female singer at least, and it is amazing, and I think it's wonderful that our younger generations get to hear her all over again. And I hope that young people start listening to Maria again, because we're not going to see her like the likes of her ever again. I don't think she's a voice that comes around once every couple centuries. It's we're not going to hear that quality again. But maybe I'm just being biased towards Maria. Maybe we do have singers that just need to be coaxed out of their shell and need to be have the opportunities to be heard.
Maybe it was also a period in time. She was a product of that period in time. She was a product of her childhood. She was a product of those hardship, I think we will have other people who will be a product of, their planets, their charts, and both of them are a product of Chiron in Aries. So it's all about their wound is impotence and their gift to the world is empowerment. So I think they both really did an incredible job of that with that movie. I mean, I think it's absolutely phenomenal what they did.
Yeah, and I just noticed that the transiting Uranus was on Algol when the movie was released. And something I just remembered too, there was a doctor who was administering um, medication to Maria in the film. Now I can't remember the European name for the drug, but it's the equivalent of Quaaludes in the American drug system. But that doctor's name, we talk about Sun conjunct Neptune. Um, I thought that was quite unusual. Um,
Yes,
but
for
anyway,
of them, there was that kind of the issues to do with medications, with drugs. That was also part of their journey, really, of kind of like trying to take and also the honesty, the brutality of the emotional depths they went to in their own life, the loneliness, the pain, the grief. And I think it was Maria herself who said, great music doesn't come out of just moments of fun or joy. Great music, it's like great poetry, great literature comes from that deep, deep felt experience of pain, which Angelina Jolie has also gone through with her own health issues, with her own issues with drugs, with her own issues with depression that she shared, and suicidal ideation when she was younger. So this is real, it's visceral, and we all know that we recognize that. We're drawn towards that when people have experience, when they're not just talking about it from a book and saying, oh yes, people get depressed very often, and they've no idea what depression is. So I think this movie, it's embedded in the movie, the reality, the joys, the passion, the trauma, but the incredible resilience and what comes out of all of that, what can come out of it from these two amazing women. I think it's really phenomenal. As you can hear, I just love it.
and just to kind of close, the movie ended with Maria. The whole entire movie is about the last week of Maria's life when she's not sure her voice is going to be strong enough, and the final scenes of her singing her final song, and people gathering outside her Paris apartment to hear her. And then her caretakers come in and find her deceased on the floor. So she gets her final song in perfection. That lovely Pluto moon and South Node, I think is the final word in the film.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
Margaret, I thank you so much for joining us and talking about your favorite film. I know it takes a bit to put yourself out there. And would you like to say a couple words about your course? And I'll put the card in at the end of how we can find the course.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for asking me about the course. It's a new four-step program called Astrology of the Heart. It's a process. It's where I'm using my psychotherapy, and there's several of the presenters are also psychotherapists and psychologists. And we're really blending the two to bring people through 4 steps of a program exactly for this purpose of inner knowledge and inner awareness. So it's a little bit different. It's all relationship based. You can do all 4 steps. You can get accredited as a certified relationship astrologer, which is a unique qualification we offer. Or you can just do one or more of the steps if there are topics that interest you. So do please go to our website, www.relationshipsandastrology.com, or go to our Instagram page, Relationships and Astrology. And of course, we're delighted that Alex is going to be doing some of the teaching, and we'll be doing more teaching as well for the advanced group. So thank you, Alex, for having me here today. It's been a joy.
Brilliant, amazing. If you would like to do your favorite biopic, it has to be a biopic, let me know. Leave your comments below if you want to enter into the conversation or if you have anything you want to add. But for now, to the stars.
To the stars.
Okay, thank you.
Was that okay, Alex? Was
That
that
was perfect, except for my wrong charts, but I'll fix it.
a glass of water? Thank you so
Mm,
much. I love that. That was so
thank
much
you.
really fun. fun to do things with you. I love it. I love your style. And I love your astrology. Alex, your astrology is so good. I've done podcasts with so many people who have dire astrology. They come out with
Oh,
so
oh,
anyway, boy, thank you. I better go to
okay, sure. Thank you. Take care.
your evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. And that's it for this episode of Mirror Mirror. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the charts and the cinema. If you enjoyed today's Cosmic Deep Dive, be sure to follow the podcast, leave a review, and share it with a fellow stargazer or film lover. You can find more astrological insights and the stories behind your favorite biopics in my book, Mirror Mirror, The Astrology of Famous People and the Actors Who Portrayed Them. Until next time, keep watching the skies and the screen.